This is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll start with declarations of interest, which there appears to be none. So we'll move on to item 2, the apologies for absence and any substitutes.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Wymark and we have Councillor Brennan as his substitute.
Thank you. A minute of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 18th of November. I've already observed that the exclusion of the press and public appears to have been brought forward 1 point. I'll just mention that here because that was done before the allocation of the contract, not when we were discussing the item before. That will just be shifted. Did anybody else see anything else? Okay, we'll accept them as fair with that amendment. We'll move on to Chairman's announcements. I have none, you'll be pleased to hear. So we move on to the public speaking and is there anybody who wishes to speak? There is, good. Not that it's good that no one doesn't want to speak, it's good obviously in the nature of this meeting that we get straight on with it. And we'll move straight on then to the annual review of registered providers. And we've got someone from Clarion Housing here, Sally, and Richard also is leading on this. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to say a very short bit. However, I just want to extend my thanks to Sally from Clarion for attending and hopefully being able to field a number of your questions as well as myself. As you are aware, last year I brought together how we're working with housing providers and this timed very closely with the TSM, the tenant satisfaction measures coming ahead. As in the report, there's 22 measures, 12 qualitative and 10 quantitative. This is very much taking the feedback from the residents who are asked how they feel are Clarion are performing, but equally there are some key performance indicators such as whether gas checks have been done, which Clarion and other housing associations have to report on. As you will see in the report, generally everyone's going up. There's improvements across the sector, flagship notably regarding their repairs. Unfortunately, sorry Sally, Clarion has seen a slight reduction. However, I must say at this point, this is done by organisation, it is not done by region. We have a very good working relationship with Clarion on a local level. Their reporting is done for the whole of Clarion, so therefore Sally is responsible for the local region, but not necessarily on a national level. I also wanted to point out that we've got 23 more social housing lets this year as opposed to this time last year, and we are seeing year on year above target delivery. Since 2018-19 there has been 1,073 more homes, affordable homes delivered for our registered providers than was on target. So we are seeing really healthy delivery within our area, which is helping with homelessness significantly. That's all I was going to cover because I imagine there may be a number of questions regarding the report. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Who would like to kick off some questions or comments? Oh, my word. Shane.
Hello. That's better. Right. I'll ask a question quickly because I don't think it's going to last that long. Yeah, with regards to the report for Clarion, it seems a little bit unfair that you get sort of figures for the entire area rather than just your region. Are there any plans to bring out a report that just does your region?
So the tenant satisfaction measures are a relatively new thing. So just a bit of background, the regulator for social housing kind of brought in a whole raft of new regime changes in the last couple of years. So this is only the second year we've been required to report on the tenant satisfaction measures. I mean, of course, we've always gathered a variety of different performance measures about the business and how we're performing. So the tenant satisfaction measures is just one set of data that we use. we've got, and I guess the benefit of the tenant satisfaction measures is that there's some equity across all social housing providers. Having said that, there are differences within the way people, for example, gather data. So, for example, some housing providers will do more face-to-face surveys to get the tenant satisfaction measure data. Flagship, I understand, do a proportion of face-to-face visits that tends to get better results. And also there are things like, for example, there is, as Richard alluded to, the London providers, and we've got quite a bit of stock in London, tend to see a low satisfaction measures. I guess where I'm going to this is, it's because it is just one in a raft. Whilst there is some, benefits in that it gives a bit of a kind of common understanding of measures across businesses, it's kind of there are also some differences in that inform how the results come together. So we also do gather a lot of, as I say, day-to-day operational performance figures. So, for example, we report on things like customer satisfaction following some kind of contact with us. We call them transactional surveys. So when a customer has a contact with a repairs team, they'll be followed pretty much soon after a survey that's conducted. Similarly, I work with a housing team that do the day-to-day kind of customer contact about sort of tenancy issues, and if a member of my team has some kind of contact with them, we'll also do a transactional survey. So we've got a raft of data about those particular transactions, and just to sort of I brought a bit of data with me. So, for example, with our local team, the repairs satisfaction is running about 90%, which we think we're really happy with. Similarly, day-to-day transactions with my team is running about 80%, and that includes things like where we're dealing with antisocial behaviour. So in answer to your first point, was there any plans to recreate the tenant satisfaction measures and do more local data? Not right now, because we're kind of conforming to what we're required to do for the regulator in order to give that sort of general level of awareness of performance across housing providers. But we're just choosing to also gather a lot of operational data on performance of our teams so that we can better inform kind of day-to-day stuff, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I mean, it just would have been nice, I suppose, that this report puts you in sort of comparison with others that are doing sort of things specifically within their region. It just seemed to me that you're being sort of held hostage to fortune for other areas that may not be performing as well.
Yeah, I would prefer to be sitting here with a fantastic set of results. But as I say, I guess it's just because we kind of have to conform to that, and we, as a business, choose to sort of manage things a little bit more differently on an operational level.
Sorry, just jump in. You may find the same with Flagship happens next year, because Flagship have just joined up with Bromford Housing, so they're going to be a massive provider as well. And they may find that because they're no longer just reporting on a local level, they may see their performance fall down. Equally, Bromford may be performing beautifully, which is going to drag up the Flagship performance. So you just don't know what they're going to do from a more national footprint.
Caroline.
I was going to go along the same lines. You've got national figures here, and like TP09, it says 25.5%. Our demographics is completely different to what inner London or London is, and I think it would be useful if we could have a district-wide measures rather than national measures, because it's not really relevant to our area, is it?
I mean, I can certainly provide you with some, as I say, operational data, if that's helpful. I'm happy to share some figures on our operational data. At this moment in time, as I say, we're not looking to reproduce this on a regional level, just because of the data, it wouldn't be as robust as we'd like it to be. But I'll certainly take that back as an observation from you, to Clary, and see whether it's something we can explore in the future.
Yeah, Lacey.
Thank you. You've got the lowest number of stage 1 complaints per 1,000 households. Sorry, you've got the lowest number of stage 1 complaints received per 1,000 homes, but your percentage of responding in Housing Ombudsman's timeframe for stage 1 and stage 2 is the lowest.
So I think we are, I mean, even though we've got the lowest number, we still have incredibly high volumes of complaints, being a large provider. We have recently had an inspection by the social housing regulator, which again is a new thing. So we've recently had kind of them coming in-house, doing a full inspection of us. We got a C2 rating, which, I mean, just to use kind of Ofsted equivalent, is probably the equivalent of a good in Ofsted, you know, comparison. As I say, this is a new thing. And, you know, we held our hands up to say that complaints is an area of challenge for us as a business, just because of, whilst the comparative numbers are low, we are seeing really high volumes. It's, you know, within our regulatory feedback, that was an area that we knew going into the regulatory meeting, visit, that was going to be an area of challenge, and sure enough, it did come out. We've got quite a lot of changes in the pipeline, some that have already started to hit, that we hope will help us to see improvements. One of the biggest challenges we've got is just around responding to things within time frame, and obviously that's going to lead to more dissatisfaction. So we've got some changes in the pipeline to help us improve responses, and just kind of, we are as a business really trying to make good use of the lessons learned from where we go wrong with complaints. But yeah, I mean, that's something that we, as I say, know is an area of challenge for us, and hopefully I hope to sit here. I mean, it's a very much a focus for us as a business right now, so I feel confident that, you know, in a year's time we'll be able to sit here and see some improvement there.
Can I just comment on the quantitative measures in Appendix 1? The three on the top of page 22. While it seems quite good that you're at 97, 98 and 97% for those three checks, those seem quite serious things not to be at or within an ounce of being at 100% at. Asbestos checks, 97.7% of properties done within the time frame. Legionella assessments, 98.5%, and proportion of homes where the lifts have had safety checks done, 97.6%. These seem to be things that, should there be something going wrong, could potentially lead to serious dangers, and perhaps dangers which go beyond just for a single person. I'm thinking, Legionella, you could have a whole household or a whole building struck down, and that's potentially really very, very serious. And asbestos checks, again, you know, you only have to start having it start to break up, and it's in a, if this is a shared accommodation or in a block where there's a shared throughput of air all coming through, suddenly you've got a whole load. So those worry me that they are so high. When you look at, compared to the data, yeah, one of those, Legionella, one of the other housing providers, is also low, which I think is poor. But is there any reason, because that seems odd, that safety checks, being someone who does health and safety in my place of work, they're things there's no exemption for. They have to be done. If they're not done, why they're not being done? I'd be in trouble if we weren't checking getting our Legionella thing signed off, because my place of work is a school. So, you know, it to me it seems quite serious. Is there any sort of comment on that?
So there is a degree of, you know, 100% is quite difficult to achieve, and in certain circumstances, for example, it requires access to customers' home, and for whatever reason, sometimes we can't get access to a customer's home, and that means that we're always struggle to get to the 100%. And we've got historically we've had a really good working relationship with our gas contractor, so that's obviously an area where we've put a lot of attention over the years, and that we come close to is we think is, you know, the performing as close as we can to get to on that one. I'll be honest, I'm not prepared. I can get a bit more sort of information about efforts with regards to that. Perhaps I can give you that separately, Richard. So I can give you some feedback on that specifically, if that's all right.
Anybody else? Anything they'd like to ask or query? No? Appears oh, sorry, Jonathan.
I was looking at these figures. Obviously, for us as councillors, I think the repairs, is where we would get, we'd have the residents contacting us when the repairs weren't done and everything like that. So looking at the figures for that, I was quite, impressed with the figures and everything like that. The teams you have, they're obviously local teams, or do you have them coming from a long way? Because obviously that would be where they're waiting for people to come and everything like that. Because I think that would be important for us if we had an idea of, where people contact us and say, oh, we're waiting for repairs. If we could, say that we knew roughly how it worked and everything. So is it more of a local thing? So we sort of like for us in Broadland, we'd have our own teams.
So the vast majority of repairs are done by our in-house repairs team, Clarion Response, and they're all based locally. They're all living in and around Broadland. I mean, we really have kind of keen to ensure that we've got a local workforce delivering it. We do have some specialist contractors. So with some services we have to outsource it, things like gas. Gas contracting is one that we outsource, and they're a particularly big contractor. But we do have within the procurement process there's a requirement to make sure that that workforce is local, so that in order that we don't have challenges with them having to come across vast distances. So the vast majority of the day-to-day stuff is a very strong local workforce. We're really pleased that our local team is fair. Turnover's quite slow, so they're all really familiar with the tenants, they're really familiar with the properties, and I think that really helps us to ensure we're kind of delivering well locally.
Well, I think probably in the past, some of my comments have probably been a bit negative about how the system works and everything like that. To be fair, looking at these figures, I was quite impressed because Clarion is a bigger organisation, obviously covering the bigger area as well. So I sort of take that into, when I was looking down and seeing the comparable figures and everything, I was really quite impressed, which is unusual for me.
Well, thank you. And as I say, I know, as I say, we are. I mean, I feel very proud of Clarion because we have got a really good team, and as I say, when it comes to customer satisfaction, we get really good customer satisfaction from our repairs team, and so currently about 90%, and I think that's reflective of the hard work they do locally.
Caroline, do you want to say something else?
Yeah, if someone has a complaint or a repair, how do they contact you? Do they ring you, or can they go into your offices to talk face to face with you? And how long does it normally take to get a repair done?
So they can contact us however they feel. We don't get many visits to the office just because we've got an office across the business park here. So, but we've got various ways you can ring customer services. You can go onto your social media. You can actually, I mean, if you've got a repair, the best thing to do is if you can, is to make use of our online booking. So you can just ring up and book it at a time to suit you. But if you can't do that, then we've got telephone people at the end of the phone, of course, to take calls. The vast majority of calls, repairs are still done via the phone, even though we've got online options as well. Staff are out and about all the time, so they can take repairs over when they're out and about too. We've got basically two types of repair: an emergency, which we should be out within 24 hours. So that is things like, this time of year it's no heating, anything electrical problems we'll get out within 20. Toilet, it depends. I would say if somebody's got no other toilet in the house, and they've got a broken toilet, well, it should be 24 hours. Or if it's not a flush,
You have to wait a week before they had.
okay, yeah. so it's 24 hours for an emergency, and then for everything else it is up to 4 weeks. But of course, when with things like toilets, they will tend to be out a lot quicker. So it does. We've kind of just got we've simplified it to 2 stages now, 2 service levels. A toilet can depend. We also, sorry, I lost my train and I'm back on track now. We've also got lots of things on our system which show where somebody is vulnerable, and that will also kind of change the quickness with which we might come out. So if somebody we know is particularly vulnerable, then they should, hopefully that will be reflected in how their repair is dealt with.
Anybody else? Well, looks like we're done for this element. Thank you so much for coming along and answering, fielding our slightly awkward questions. You're having to justify things that you're not necessarily also fully in control of because of this is a national figure. But thank you for all you're doing for the residents that we're sending you, and the figures, although everything can always be better, I'm sure we're very pleased that they're looking very positive in general. So thank you. And there wasn't a recommendation, was there? It was just a note. Yes. So we'll note it. No. Let's move on to item number 7, the allocation and approval of energy production within the Broadland district. And I would just say that just to remind members to steer your comments away from any ongoing applications, because we don't want to predetermine or have discussed in the wrong forum anything which is yet to come before the planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Evening, everyone. So we've got a report in front of us that has been a request of ONS through a topic paper from Councillor Thomas, and the report is as it says on the agenda, and it's to review the allocation and approval of energy production projects within the district, and that's focusing on the growing number of solar schemes that we're seeing over recent years. It sets out the current position that we have, and you'll see that over the last couple of years in particular, we've had a number of applications in for larger solar schemes, but that also includes BESS, so that's the battery energy storage schemes too. And we've also seen a number of cable routes coming from the offshore wind as well. I've proposed that there's a few options available in terms of how you want to frame your discussion tonight. One of those is the production of a supplementary planning document, and just for members' information, but I think we know this anyway, the SPD, as I refer to it, it can't create new policy, it can only expand upon policy we have, so that would be taken through from the policies within the Greater Norwich Local Plan. The other option I proposed is that we could undertake a call for sites through the forthcoming review of the Greater Norwich Local Plan, or GNLP, as I'll refer to as we go through. The other option, as you'll see I've put in there, is do nothing. It's not do nothing, it's to continue to consider the planning applications through the normal planning process, and either that's through the delegated way or through planning committee. And I know, taking Councillor Starling's point, and I'm not going to talk about planning applications, but we do have one, for example, in Corston going to planning committee tomorrow. All of those options come with a cost, and all of those come with risks as well, which I've set out in the paper. Costs are understandable in terms of production of an SPD. Costs with a GNLP call for sites they would be done as part of the review, so officer time and probably get an expert cost for both of those in. And there's also the potential costs in there I've talked about in terms of reputation, I suppose, in terms of trying to welcome, it could be seen as welcoming solar schemes into the area if we did a call for sites. But the point of the report really was to stimulate a discussion. That was the request, and that's what I've given you today. So I'll shut up and leave it for you guys to talk through and answer any questions you might have.
Stuart.
Yeah, Ben, can you just help us a little bit, just to give us a little brief overview of the legislation in relation to solar farms and the government's role in that legislation, or the ability for a local authority to either resist or to approve, or how much does national government policy, energy policy, impact on the delivery of solar farms? If you could just give us just a brief sort of synopsis of that, please.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to say there's two routes. One route is the nationally significant infrastructure project route, and the other is what I refer to as the Town and Country Planning Association route, or the TCPA route, which is the one we know through planning applications that we have submitted to the council. Now, Broadland doesn't really see a great deal, hasn't seen, sorry, yet, a great deal of the NSIP type applications for big scale solar schemes. It has seen NSIP applications for the cable routes coming from the offshore wind. I don't necessarily expect there would be a lot of those NSIP schemes that would come through, the reason being that you're not necessarily that close to the Norwich Main or in connection to the big substations. When we get the applications in, you all know as well as I do, we follow the route through, we go through the usual consultation process, and then there's the ability for members to call the planning application in. As I said, that's what we've got with one in Corston tomorrow. Should we approve or refuse that application, then if we refuse it, the application goes to appeal. And just being really open with you all today, what I've seen is the appeals that have been coming back have been favouring approving those energy schemes from the inspectors. They have even made reference to national policy within them as well. So when we determine the applications at a local level, we're considering the impact on the best and most versatile agricultural land. I won't go through all the grades, but you have from grade 1 downwards, and grade 1 being the highest. We have a lot of high quality land within Broadland. I've seen appeal decisions in the not too distant past where the inspector has said that you've actually got a lot of it, so that's okay. You can still approve the solar scheme on it. It's an interesting way to look at it, but that's what's come back with us. What we're really looking at, going back to the detail of the planning application, what we're looking at, that's one of the key things, the impact on the BMV land. Then it's the impact on the landscape. The other issues that come in, highways, a bit, not massively in there. Obviously impact on trees and those sorts of things. They're the things we can consider applications on, but to answer the question to the point, we are seeing national policy start to have an impact on local decisions in applications that we're determining.
Eleanor.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Thomas for bringing this to committee, because I think it's quite an interesting issue and one that is potentially quite contentious in the public arena. And also thank you very much for the report. I have quite a few questions, but to start off with, reflecting on what's just been said about national policy and what's going on in Broadland, I gather from the report it might take around a year, and obviously funding to produce an SPD if we were thinking of doing that. But we've actually, of course, got local government review coming up. So I would suggest that if we were thinking about even going down that route, it would be better if it was developed, if it was needed, for the new unitary authority or authorities, depending on what we end up having. I've recently been looking at a webinar where the Director of Planning and Growth at Buckinghamshire Council, which is now a unitary council, was looking at the ramifications of that for planning and how we amalgamate planning departments. And of course, when you have smaller district councils all having to come together to create a much bigger planning department overall, although you might have localised planning teams. And the suggestion from their experience was we need to move away from this smaller scale district council planning approach. We need to move away from that mode and start to think about things on a much bigger scale. And that means being a lot more collaborative. So I'd suggest that with what we've got coming up, we need to be thinking about this on a much bigger scale. I would suggest we need to be thinking about it in terms of Norfolk rather than what's going on in Broadland or South Norfolk or North Norfolk District Council at the moment, because some of these schemes, particularly the NSIPs, are really, really, they're big, they're significant, and the infrastructure that goes with them is as well. So that's just one point I'd like to make. But a question I've got is that at the moment, for example, we can look at a map of NSIP energy projects for Broadland and South Norfolk. Well, not just NSIPs, but we can also see on our mapping where the other schemes are coming in as well when a planning application is lodged. But my question is there a map at the moment of all the energy projects going on in Norfolk, which shows both the NSIPs and the local authority energy infrastructure planning applications? And if there isn't, I haven't seen one, and if there isn't, is it possible that we could have one in preparation for the unitary authority coming forward?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to, I know the first part wasn't a question, but I'm just going to make a point on that because I think it's relevant to do so. I'm trying to make it's only a brief point, but in 4.8 of the report, I've mentioned that we are starting to try to look at this at a Norfolk-wide scale, because we and other districts, primarily South Norfolk and Broadland, are starting to see the larger NSIP schemes coming to start to make quite a difference to the landscape of Norfolk. And when I say the landscape, I don't just mean, you know, the trees and the green fields, but actually what makes people want to come to this area and changing the actual nature of what's physically there. So we are starting to look at that at a wider piece. So I suppose what I'm saying then, to answer the actual question, is that yeah, we are keen to try to look at that at a wider level. We don't have that map. No, that's true. We don't. We do work with county colleagues and actually, sorry, I should have said Kingsland and West Norfolk are starting to see some of these as well. We could certainly take that away as something to look at with colleagues. It would need, obviously, other authorities to agree to share, you know, GIS data and all those sorts of things. And there might be issues of GDPR that we'd need to think about because of planning applications and that. But I can certainly take that away as something for us to consider.
Thank you. That would be really, really helpful, I think. So looking more widely as well, perhaps in Norfolk, I know you might be able to just give us the figures for South Norfolk and Broadland, but are we getting many inquiries at the moment coming in for the lower scale solar? So that's below 50 megawatts at the moment, isn't it? The cut-off point between the applications that come to local planning authorities and the NSIPs. At the moment, it's 50 megawatts, isn't it?
It's gone up slightly.
Right. Sorry.
It's gone up to 150 megawatts now after the most recent changes to the NPPF earlier in the year.
Thank you. So in which case, if it's 150 megawatts, we're going to then, I assume, be seeing far fewer applications coming forward to local planning authorities.
No, so it's the other way around. See what I mean? So yeah, in theory, we should be seeing more coming to us.
So bearing that in mind, are we aware of the figures likely to be coming forward in the next 2 to 3 years? What are we actually looking at? Because the East is quite clearly marked for major infrastructure, particularly solar and possibly other types of infrastructure as well. It seems to me that somebody somewhere in government has sat down in a meeting, looked at a map and said, this is where we want these applications. The cables will go in, the major grid infrastructure will go in, and surrounding that we will get a lot of energy applications coming in, the battery energy solar systems, the storage systems and the solar, and probably the wind, onshore wind as well. So have we got any idea? I mean, has the government been discussing this with local authorities, or is it just imposing it upon them?
Obviously not for me to talk about what governments are doing or not doing. they set the framework in which planning applications can be determined either through the NSIP or the TCPA route, and then it's for the development industry to determine whether they want to go and chance their arm. They consider it more than chancing their arm. And they would go to locations where they would get the most daylight hours of sun. We happen to be one of those locations. So, and then you look at, what they look at then is how close are you to connections. Norwich Main is what I've referred to before, and that's why you see a congregation of them around that in South Norfolk in particular. I have got a figure. It's you know, take it with a pinch of salt, but there's a thing called the TEC register. Sorry, I can't remember what the TEC register, what TEC stands for, and that's where people actually put forward, in effect, they're scoping to see if they can get a connection to the grid. We keep a track of that TEC register as best we can, but we don't have the details of the names of the schemes. They'll be very high level. But at the moment, albeit this was a couple of weeks ago, on the TEC register at the moment, there's about 3,000 megawatts worth of schemes who've tried to get grid connections or are proposing to get grid connections. Now, some of those may well never happen, but that is, I did have the figures, I've not got them in front of me, but that could deliver like hundreds of thousands of worth of properties energy provision. So it could deliver a big number.
Sorry about all these questions. So energy production is going to not just include solar, but possibly onshore wind farms as well. At what size do they need to be to fall into the NSIP category? And have we had any interest so far in the district or at county level in onshore wind farms?
So whilst I definitely don't just type here and try and find out the answer to the NSIP one, we haven't had any pre-apps at all about onshore wind, and I am surprised about that, but we've had none at all to us because it's been made much easier to come in. So in terms of NSIP, if they're under 100 megawatts, then they would come to us. If they're over, then they'd go into the NSIPs.
Hopefully this is the last question, but so this paper has come to us to note and for discussion, but it's not come to us for a decision. So what is the future for this? So is it going to be coming to an organisation for a decision, and if so, who will make the decision on this?
I'm gonna hand over to Sinead if that's okay.
So as this came forward as a topic form to ONS, or ONS obviously can't make decisions, you can make recommendations to others who can make decisions, but obviously you would need to be very clear on what it is that you're recommending, and then we could work through where that would need to go. But at this stage, this is a review that has been brought forward as a result as a topic form, so there is no decision to take.
Thank you. We've got 3 people waiting, so we're going to go for Martin, then Peter, then Shane.
Thank you. I had a question, but then it slightly changed just because of some of your answers earlier. So I was originally just going to ask about the SPDs and on that route, and have any of the other district councils within Norfolk got existing SPDs which aligned already to the GNLP? But then, given what you just said around the appeals, and then they're going with the national framework, to what extent would an SPD actually carry any weight towards that appeal process?
Yeah, so Enabling Authority South Norfolk has progressed with an SPD. That is at this point in time, we are out to consultation on that at the moment. So if you looked on the website, you would be able to find that SPD. That's primarily focused on the landscape character of South Norfolk and isn't a document that's there to stop development. It's there to guide where appropriate or inappropriate forms of energy schemes might find themselves in the district. So then to answer the second question, there's always benefit in trying to have further planning documents because they give more clarity to developers, but they only have a limited weight, to be really honest. The policy is the weight. The SPD provides that guidance in terms of trying to either, through, well, you know that we've got a self-build SPD that gives developers guidance in what we think would class as self-build through policy 7.5 or policy whatever. This would, if you were doing an SPD, you'd have to have a specific focus on what you wanted to do in the same way that South Norfolk one has. So there is benefit to it, but we've got the policies both within the local plan and in the NPPF that are actually the key drivers in making the decisions.
Good evening. I have to say that the whole issue of solar farms is a bit of a blight, to be honest. I'm either affected directly or indirectly by several, and the way in which these are coming through is quite honestly a bit of a nightmare, because basically, as you have already intimated, they are in the process of changing the landscape, changing the way that we look at the landscape, and in my view, it's a blight on the landscape. What armoury can we actually put in place to give us some chance of actually managing all these? Because at the moment they're springing up. There's good opportunity in this part of the country because essentially land is relatively cheap in comparison with the southeast and so on and so forth. It's the southeast that needs all this power, but they've got very expensive land in comparison with us. So they come to local farmers who basically are struggling to make ends meet because of the way in which our farming industry is organised at the moment. But essentially, it's too good an opportunity for farmers to actually say, yes, I will take the money, and yes, I will actually help my individual circumstances greatly, as a result of that, that will be an impact on the environment for many, many years to come. And at the moment, I feel basically helpless. And I worry that we don't have sufficient arms in our armoury to be able to at least curb some of these issues, or even perhaps control them. I know at the end of the day, Ed Miliband will make the decision and he'll just wave a wand and say yes to all of these without too much thought about the impact on the environment. But I still feel helpless, and I would like somewhere in this paper a direct opportunity to actually make a difference so that we could actually go to our residents and say, yes, we are trying to manage the situation as best we can. At the moment, all I have is disenchanted residents who feel they have nothing actually to gain and a lot to lose. Sorry.
No, no need to be at all. I think what I've presented to you, and it might not seem much, but they're your options. Well, that's not for me. That's not for me to do. That's for the discussion. That's the discussion. I'm not well. I tell you what, I won't dance around it. What I would do is what's been suggested already. I think this is a bigger issue than Broadland. I think it's a county-wide issue, and I think that's where the most impact could be had. Because I think if districts go and fight these on their own, I'm not being really blunt, I don't think it's going to get massively far. I think if we start looking at Norfolk as a collective and what are the what makes it special, then that's where you could start to have an impact and lobby government and make that point. because if you start, like I've alluded to in the report, but also we've discussed already, if you start having very large scale coverage of solar across the whole county, does that impact on tourism? Does that impact on, therefore, the economic growth of the area? That's the kind of thing that we've got to consider. And you'll see where I'm getting to. I am slightly dancing around, giving a direct answer. But we as planners have always got to balance that up with, well, actually, what about the issues that both the area and the country are facing in terms of energy as well, and energy security? So that's why it's a bit difficult for me to give a really direct answer, because I've got to consider everything in the round. But as I said, I think a Norfolk-wide perspective is the best approach.
Well, I want to cut across Peter here. I think when you said, and I know Shane's yet to speak, but you sort of said it's a county issue and it's almost like a discussion that's starting to happen. What I think we need to know is that people in your position across all authorities across Norfolk are getting together and are already thinking about this with perhaps a mind to local government review, but so something is already in the works almost in all authorities across Norfolk, so that they're working and singing from the same song sheet, so that within the first months of a new council being in place, and obviously new planning documents and frameworks having to be drawn up, that something can be there ready. I think that's perhaps what we need to, as a committee here, that this is not just, as Alan said about the local government review, we are, or reform, so that we are waiting, we're sort of kicking things down, the can down the road, waiting for something to happen, and then it could be that then, it's another year after that, and then it's another 18 months to implement it, and suddenly you're talking 5-6 years time. That's, I think, perhaps sort of summarising where people are sort of nodding at, but I'll also give Shane a chance to talk, and then you can come back to both of us.
Thank you. When you finished. Yeah, microphone's a bit too loud. Just moving the discussion forward as it's been developing. I was looking at 4.3 on page 25, which said about the SPD having drawbacks and being sort of quite resource intensive. But having said that, I agree with Councillor Lehman that this is going to be a much wider thing other than districts. But SPDs do exist. I did a scant research on the internet, and it's SPDs are held for Durham, Chelmsford, Newark and Sherwood, Lincolnshire and others. So I mean, it's obviously considered important enough for those areas that this SPD was included. But then it brings me to the notion of whether or not, as you said, that the SPD is only enhancing and has a small impact on the actual planning itself. So bearing in mind that we're likely to be going sort of much more towards unitary sort of local governments, is it that the planning policy itself is not as robust as it could be, and perhaps that needs to change rather than sort of adding in something that has little impact. Because obviously for the people that are impacted by these planning sort of situations and solar farms and that, it's clearly an emotive issue and one which other areas have needed to address. So I suppose what I'm thinking is that although it's something that is a much wider thing, in the short term, do we need that SPD, and could we not sort of borrow from sort of other policy documents rather than trying to reinvent the wheel?
No, we planning never necessarily does anything that new. It often borrows from other places. So, but I'll go back to that. So a slightly blunt point of no. If you were going to do an SPD, it would have to have a reason for being, and that reason for being, I'm just using the South Norfolk one for example, because that's what we're working on at the moment. Is it about trying to guide development away from the most sensitive landscapes? If that was the case, well, fine, that could be an approach to take. If you were to do that, you would then need to go and get a consultant, because quite honestly, we haven't got the in-house time or expertise to be able to do that, to to go and consider the landscape of Broadland. And yes, there is a landscape a document already, but we would need to go back and revisit that and have a look at it in the context of solar. And I would suggest it goes out wider to all sorts of energy schemes, not just solar. Therefore, it just wouldn't be a quick and easy process from taking from others, because it's our landscape. That's what we're here to protect, and that's what we're here to think of. So that's what we would need to look at. Take the point about the policies. The policies that we have are good. They're strong policies to protect the environment, but also to be progressive and deliver development as well. They are formed from the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, as well, which is primarily pro-energy schemes. So if we were to go contrary to that in our own local policies, in say the new local plan, we would probably struggle with that, as in when we get to the planning inspector considering our plan at examination. So we always have to be careful of not going too far one way that's against national policy, because it wouldn't pass the gateways. It's not a great answer, but that is the answer, unfortunately. I'm sorry, to answer your question, Nick, as well. Oh, don't miss that out. We are doing work with other local authorities. It's only at its embryonic stage. Perhaps if it could be a request of ONS for me to come back in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months or so, just to say where we've got to with it. I know that sounds like quite a long time, but these things don't happen quickly.
I'm seeing a lot of nods from all political shades, so that seems to be something which we would be keen on. So we'll maybe do that recommendation at the end. I know Jonathan would like to say something.
Yeah, just a sort of basic way of looking at it. I think for me the problem is when you get a load of smaller projects that are all then sort of join up. So all of a sudden you're sort of saying, oh, it's only that size, but then the next one is that size, and the next one is that size, and that all sort of pokes on. I've sort of seen, obviously, that the South Norfolk area, I know some of those little villages down there, and looking at that whole issue down there, where there's gone right across that A140 corridor, right across there, some of those little villages are completely surrounded. Now, I've looked at the renewables map we've got online for Broadland. Well, it's Broadland and South Norfolk, obviously. If I looked at that map, I'd say that that's a major problem, sort of more for South Norfolk, because it's such a big area. We don't seem to have that sort of big area in Broadland, but I am hearing, obviously, from lots of different councillors that things are going on in different areas. Are sort of obviously the pipeline from, or whatever it is, the cables from Bacton to Necton obviously go right through Aylsham and Reetham and everything like that. And then obviously we've also got from Easton down to Swardston, there's that bit there. But if I was looking at a map and I was a resident, I would say it doesn't look like there's a big problem in Broadland compared with obviously what they've got in South Norfolk. But I know there are lots of things happening. So is that the map is right, isn't it? Yeah. And I feel that what we'll have is if we do have lots of projects, I think we're all agreed, I think, that they'll go to the planning inspector who'll put them through anyway on the grounds that that's the government policy, if you know what I mean. They're not going to be refused. But at the moment, I see that South Norfolk, like I say, with all those villages completely surrounded by it, I see that Broadland is maybe not as productively easy to do it. Obviously, where we've got more of the Broads area and everything like that. But I just see at the moment, if I'm looking at that map as a resident, I'm thinking, yeah, there's a bigger problem there and not as much here. But do you think that will come forward as we get, as they do more, when they've sort of filled all that space up, will they come forward more for us, do you think? Or just that's the question.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So South Norfolk has got significant schemes, Tasway and East Pye, as I say, you've signed the A140, and that is because of its close proximity and ease of connection to the Norwich Main. And the Norwich Main near Dunstan, where the substation is. Broadland, by virtue of its location, hasn't got that easy access to it. So at the moment, it would be harder for a developer to get that connection, because they'd have to put significantly longer cable routes in at more cost. So they're going to, it's just sensible, isn't it? You would go around where the Norwich Main and Connections is. I don't know is the answer to the second part of that question, because someone could build another, substation of decent size. That would cost a lot of money. Someone could go, oh, do you know what? It's worth our while going for a longer cable route because of the money we'll get from it. I don't know. If I were, I can see what I can see at the moment, which is it's simple and easier to go closer to the main, and that's going to continue until those fields are done.
Just on that, obviously, neither of us are experts in cable planning, as it were, but that cable that goes from Bacton to Necton, obviously, which goes past Aylsham and Reetham, if they could feed into that as it went past, I guess there would be scope to put more solar farms up near Aylsham to feed into that cable as they go past. But obviously, that would be someone else's cable gone from their scheme, and then would they be able to feed into it? There's obviously lots of things that would be discussed on that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense that is why their concentration there. Because I just looked at that map and I just thought, we're lucky in Broadland we haven't got that sort of issue already happening, but we'll have to wait and see.
The merit in having a county-wide policy done through the duty to cooperate, and what's the other county national county strategic planning forum or something like that, is it?
Strategic planning forum.
Yeah. I think there may be merit in looking at a county-wide policy for this, because especially with the advent of LGR, the position of maybe a directly elected mayor and all these kind of aspects of changes in local government, either way, that policy could become a transferable policy to whatever the shape of local government is going to be in Norfolk. Because I think this is a highly contentious issue. It's not going to go away, and we're going to have more of this sort of palm. And I think we have to look at it in perspective of what you've already alluded to, Ben, is the land quality, location, what people like Jonathan's already said, connectivity, etc., etc. And I think we also have to look at it as the national picture. I know we can't influence the national picture, but the UK, Norfolk is the second, third largest food producing county in the country, and especially on grain-based products. And, we're talking about thousands of acres of land here. Some might be grade 1 down to grade 3. With UK food security dropping from just under 80%, 80% to just about 58, 60%, I think all of these factors need to be borne in mind. Now, I accept very much that a lot of that is a national issue, a national policy, but I think we do need a position on it in Norfolk. And I think, again, what Nick was alluding to, the chairman was alluding to, I think there's merit in you working with colleagues through the duty to cooperate, through the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, to achieve some kind of county-wide policy, which at least there would be a degree of unanimity. Because the other problem with doing it as the current districts, again, as Jonathan has alluded to, due to favourable locations, etc., South Norfolk has probably had a disproportionate amount of solar farm development in the last 18 months, 2 years. Realistically, because of the nature of the east, because of the flat landscape, etc., etc., they're obviously going to come, I say obviously, not obviously, but quite likely would become Broadland's way as regards the east of England. So I think there's strong merit in a county-wide approach. And I'd like to maybe propose that as we go to the recommendations. Sorry.
The only reason I just wanted to come in, just for hopefully a useful bit of clarity, is that as we move towards devolution and the Mayor's Authority, and we are going to need what's called a spatial development strategy. That will be the top tier of planning across the area. And obviously that's not just Norfolk, that's Suffolk as well. There may be an opportunity within that to actually look at it at a wider comprehensive level, and that's perhaps the conversation I could have because we are in the very early stages, although we'll have to work then quite quickly, of producing the first SDS at the moment.
So in the current GNLP, there is certain areas which have been designated and everything else. Now, my understanding is that we're now coming into the next phase for the next GNLP, where we've got calls for sites and as consultation will be going out and various other things. So at that point, will the developers be consulted on that specific area of NSI and NSIPs for Broadland, sorry.
They're two slightly different things. So the NSIP schemes or whatever they are, they'll come in and they'll be determined at the national level through the development consent orders. One of the options I've put forward in the paper is that the council progresses with a call for sites for energy schemes as part of the Greater Norwich Local Plan Review. That would obviously need agreement both from this council and the two partner authorities to do that, and comes with challenges as I've set out within the report.
A cabinet member at the back waving at me. I think we can let him speak. Go on, Dan.
Can I just say, on that point about a call for sites, that's not something which I'm looking to push at the moment with regard to energy sites at all, unless the committee wants to try and persuade me otherwise.
Jonathan?
I was just going to say, I think I think having something, working with the GNLP or a Norfolk-wide thing would be much. Can we also suggest that we are clear that doing our own Broadland SPD is only going to take time and money and not be very relevant, and we'd rather not make you be doing something which is going to take time and money that isn't going to be as productive. I think mentioning that as well, that if we did it, we'll just probably be wasting officer time and money when we could be working on just the bigger projects, the bigger scheme. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just sort of noting down here, I mean, ideally we need to note the report. We need to note our concerns that an effective long-term option is required, because we need something which is not short-term piecemeal, something which isn't effective. And we would like, I think, therefore, to also speak with Sinead about putting it into the work programme and to give the option to come back and to report on any other discussions. But I think we perhaps need to note our concerns that an effective solution is found to, I say solution, sounds wrong, but effective policy or something which can actually be, something, when I keep saying effective, means something just not like giving false hope to local people that, oh, there's an answer, because I don't think there is one answer. I think it's about having an all-encompassing sort of framework within people who are going to get through. They've jumped through lots of hoops and they've done everything as well as they possibly can, and they've not done it just by default that we haven't got a solution. So I'm not quite sure how we put that into some form of wording, and someone here might be better at doing so than me. Sorry,
We'll cover that in the minutes, Chair, the discussion.
Yeah, so I'll just ask Alan that and then I'll get to Peter.
Sorry, I don't know if I could just ask another question. So we're going to need to have a spatial development strategy for Norfolk and Suffolk, point one. We are also going to need, presumably in addition to that, we will have to have a local plan for each unitary authority that exists. So are we best looking at having something on energy infrastructure for both the SDS and the local plans that will be coming forward, and make sure that those link up? That's going to be really important, I think. I don't know, like at the moment, how far discussions have got with all of this, but it's looking ahead now, isn't it, to what we're actually going to need to have in place. And the work, as you said, is going to be quite immense to get those things together. So it's important that they're done, you know, planned properly from the very beginning. My other question about it is, at the moment, we can have a supplementary planning document for a local plan. Can you have supplementary planning documents for the spatial development strategy as well? How does it work? Because I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that either, sadly. No, my anticipation would be no. And the reason I say I don't know yet is because all of the detail isn't there in terms of what those SDSs look like. I would expect the unitary authorities' local plans, that's where you'd have the SPDs, because the SDS should be very high level, and then the detail comes in from the local plan. So that's where I'd expect them to be made. And just to go back to the point from before, completely agree. The SDS will have to fit hand in glove, or the other way around. The unitary's local plan will have to fit hand in glove with the SDS. In effect, you know, this sounds terrible because it's not fair. It does the hard work of the detail that the SDS sets at the high level.
It's really just to reinforce what you've said. Essentially, I think we need to stress the urgency of this matter, because there's a possibility, a tendency even, that because local government is going to be reorganised, we put this on the back burner and let the future organisations deal with it. I think we have to set the path now. I think it's absolutely right to have a county-wise approach, and I would like to see something coming back to this committee as a matter of urgency, so we can actually see tangible steps for the whole county considering all these issues in order to try and get some form and some control over it, because at the moment there is no control. Jonathan, if you'd like to come to my patch, I can show you there are quite a few developments that are very, very vexatious at the moment, and I can assure you, while there might be a lot more in South Norfolk, then around us, certainly there are issues that need to be developed. So I stress what you're actually saying. I agree with you entirely. I just want to inject a degree of urgency of it.
Stuart. So we note the report, we accept, Ben will take note of our comments and concerns that we've raised and come back and report to us on future progress in liaison with Sinead to fit that in. Does that sound about right, Ben? But I'll let you come back.
That's all right. Sorry, just to I'm sure we'd take this all as read anyway. I take the points all really well made. I can't control what the rest of the Norfolk authorities do. So if I come back and I haven't got anything in great detail for you, it won't be for want of trying, but I can't today sit here and guarantee that I can come back with something that sets us on that path.
Thank you. We're all happy with my basic summary there. And Sinead's got that. Super. Thank you so much, Ben. Next time I see Dave Thomas, I'm sure he's watching somewhere, but he's raised quite an important issue here actually, and shows the value of the topic forms for members who are not on ONS to actually bring up things that we actually do need to look at. So thank you. We move on to budget questions for Cabinet. Rodney.
Thank you, Chair. This one might be a bit shorter than the last agenda item, probably not quite so contentious, but you had your informal budget workshop on the 4th of November, where a number of questions were suggested to ask the Cabinet. That detailed in the paper, and the purpose tonight is for you to either agree these or amend these for submission for Cabinet to respond to in January.
Thank you. Has anybody got any comments on the questions or anything they want changing or altering? Yes, Peter.
Can I ask for an inclusion?
Yeah. Can't see why not. That's why we're here.
what is the administration proposing to do to ensure that there is no council tax increase next year?
You're welcome to ask it. I think they'll come back with something on the lines of the government funding proposal is probably dealt with, but I don't know. That's my guess based on what we were told about funding last time. But Jonathan.
Just a few points. Right, a new question, especially in line with the fact that we've just heard today that other councils are putting up their car parking charges by 4%. We were talking about to generate income from the car park. So how are the plans to generate income from car parks coming along? We now have the opportunity for car park charges and vehicle charging on sites to generate additional income. How is that something they would consider, bearing in mind that an extra 4% has been added to someone not a million miles away? That's quite a lot of money they're generating. I just wondered if we'd got any further on that. And yeah, that's the bone. But how are the plans to income generate from the car parks? So that's the first bit. Are there? Well, there were plans, I think, and that just. All right. Oh, so can we ask then? Are there plans to progress that and whatever? We can ask that as a budget question. That's all. Yeah.
Because there clearly are not any plans, because they did make it clear at Cabinet there were no plans. So you need to frame the question in that context.
In light of the opportunity to raise income from car parking charges, is there plans to change the? Well, I suppose they've got to wait 6 months now, because if they made it on a decision at council. But I just think we've got to look at things like that, because we can't not look at it. But, yeah, but it was something that is something I think we should. But can we get a question in? I just think it's quite a relevant question, because we have got car parks. We could make income from them. Oh, so.
I mean, I know Leader of the Council made it absolutely blatantly clear, but I guess this question is, are there any plans to reconsider car parking charges? I don't think there are. Why? But yeah.
Toxic, actually.
Could you add into that, given the likely shortfall in government funding and having to try and mitigate the shortfall, are there any proposals, so that you've got a reason for asking why there might be proposals?
Having now heard that the Labour government have stopped the new Birdings funding for the district-wide food waste rollout, how are Cabinet looking to ensure this vital project can be funded, especially in light of recycling rate overall drop? You can lose the last line if people think that's a bit too contentious, but that is obviously where we know that the new burdens funding has stopped, but obviously we want to continue the food waste. Yeah. Having now heard that the Labour government have stopped the new burdens funding for the district-wide food waste rollout, how are Cabinet looking to ensure this vital project can be funded? We'll just drop the last bit, that'll be easy.
Could I, for no other reason than we would like to proudly be as unpolitical on this committee as possible, just drop the word Labour, because we'll still know what government. Not trying to be political about it, and just trying to be unbiased.
So I got the first two. I don't know, Lucy, did you get the full wording of that third one? Yeah, last one. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Any other questions tinkering with those? Thank you. We've got a good list here. Okay.
Right, just on number 20, what savings have been delivered arising from the move to the Horizon Centre? We obviously rent out space now to Norfolk County Council, is it? And the police, or we have organisations that we're renting out space to. Is there scope to rent out any additional office space to small businesses? And I know we said that before was tricky because obviously with the other organisations you've got a link, but I just think if we've got extra space that we could rent out spaces to companies, has that been considered? Because you could probably charge them more because you're not working with them, you're just charging them for space. So I don't know if that can be just added in, because that would be what savings have been delivered from the move to the Horizon Centre, and how much are we utilising the additional space for renting out to organisations?
Is there additional space for them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so we've got what savings have been delivered, but we could also ask, are we utilising the space we've got to make as much as we can from any sort of desk space? Can you word something like that? Yep. Yep.
Sorry, and I know it's not specifically in these questions here, but again, I wanted something around, given the impact that everything has had on the hospitality industry, there's nothing in the budget to offer any assistance to that, and given the huge nature of the hospitality within Broadland, what help can we give and assist to the hospitality industry?
The only thing as well, I think that's a good point actually, is we know Broadland's a tourist area as well. So I think that's just anything which we can give further explanations to how we're supporting, even if we're not just reiterating what we're doing. The only other thing that occurred to me was, I don't know if there's any way of, have we got any anticipated idea of the cost of local government reorganisation that we've spent and what we anticipate having to spend? Because I think, I'm not saying we should waste money on telling anybody how much money we've wasted in doing what the government have told us to do in order to save money, but I think it probably is useful to know when we're thinking about trying to balance budgets and avoid putting council tax up, how much enforced cost has been put on us. Rodney.
Can I just remind that actually the purpose of the workshop was very much to formulate the questions. We don't really want to be rehearsing that workshop again here tonight, so I would encourage you to restrain the additional questions, because when the Cabinet do approach, you will have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions, and indeed as part of the workshop, there would have been the opportunity for us to answer some of these questions directly. For instance, the one on the local government reorganisation, you obviously approved at full council a business case for an option which had a clear set out of the implementation costs as part of that. But obviously that doesn't stop you asking questions. So at the moment, I think we've got those basic 20 questions and got another 5 potentially being asking tonight. And I think it's also useful if members are wanting to ask questions, if they can perhaps table these so we've got a clear record of exactly what the question is we want to ask. Obviously we can do our best to capture when we look back at the recordings, but I think it would be helpful actually to make sure they are properly recorded.
Martin, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, whilst I fully concur with what you're saying, Rodney, the help and assistance given or taken from that was after the budget workshop, so there wasn't an opportunity to raise that at that point in time, which is why I raise it now at the earliest opportunity to be able to do that.
And Jonathan?
We've got a question there. What impact will the government budget on the 26th of November? That's already a question. Small businesses, because the rate relief has been changed, I think I was told. So if that's been that's an impact of that budget that the rally, and we've got plenty of small businesses that would be affected, and the hospitality businesses will be affected by that. So we can add that in with regards to the budget, where we've got the capacity to purchase future properties, the capacity for rent relief to stop on businesses. So that could be a follow-up question on that one, really.
Whilst I accept, Rodney, that what you say, we've actually sometimes been criticised, or I would say criticised, we've sometimes had it asked why we haven't asked enough questions, and we've accepted what you've said, and probably because we've got a lot of trust in you, Rodney, but I think the fact that we've got lots of questions is better than having few, and is actually what we're meant to be doing. So we don't want to make you lots of pointless work, but I think if these are genuine concerns that people are raising, and I know you're coming at it from the right way, but I think it's a positive that actually people have got lots of questions that they're wanting to add, although a lot of them are coming from one person. Go on, Jonathan.
I was just saying, are we presenting these questions to the Cabinet? They are then going to present them back to us with the question, the answer that they've got, and then we can then sort of just look down the list at their answers and ask follow-up questions? Or are they going to, each question, we've done it before, I think, both ways, but I think if you have each question then asked and then they have to reply to it, it makes quite a long list of it.
We've done it before where these questions have been answered, and then it's our chance to fire back the individual supplementaries to the questions if we're not happy with the answer or the depth of the answer, or you feel they've missed the point. So, but some of them are going to be very straightforward answers that we don't need somebody to question out, you know. No, we don't need, yeah, exactly. Not my class at school. So, yeah.
If we make question 4 smaller, what impact will the government budget on the 26th of November have on Broadland District Council? They should list off everything that we've already mentioned is the problems, like the rate relief and the purchase and properties, and then we can ask further questions on anything that they miss. But I'm pretty confident they won't miss anything.
That particular question with that supplementary was put because I believe Councillor Wymark at the actual briefing, I think he was sat at my table and specifically asked that. So I think that's there in relation to a member who was at that briefing. So I wouldn't want to take out anything that was there, especially when that person's not been able to be here. But I think if we've got lots of supplementary questions that we're noting and thinking about now, I think that's a positive. Are we happy to go ahead when we've still got that opportunity to then add these are sort of broad brush, and we can then come in on specifics on these at the meeting? And Rodney's now thinking, oh, blimey, they're going to be very... But yeah, I mean, I'm happy that those changes and those questions we've asked so far, I think, are widening the scope of what we should be looking at, but also digging. Is everyone happy with the changes that we've had and the questions here? Wonderful. Thank you, Rodney. Sorry to make more work. Martin, you going to say something?
It was just a point rather than a comment on these questions. It was just, I noted at the last budget answers, the full Cabinet was not present. Could we just stipulate that the full Cabinet is present at that session?
Oh, we certainly asked the Cabinet. I believe 2 years ago they were all here. Last year, I don't know if someone was...
Cabinet get invited
Yeah.
to that meeting.
So Cabinet will usually, I know, for example, Steve's been ill recently, but he was at Cabinet last week. I think but then someone else was ill. So, but that can happen, but the Cabinet will be asked.
Yes.
Go on. Also sounds like this. It's. I'm sure for all our viewers at home, they're hearing a very obtrusive, low, white noise in the background. It's putting off hearing our very important words. Ah, we can hear now. Right, we've got. Sorry, I lost track where we're at. We've had budget questions for cabinet. That was 8. We've got the work programme.
Yes, so this should be relatively straightforward. So the only change that has been made to the work programme since your last meeting is as a result of the last customer experience programme milestone coming in. We've now scheduled your next update on that to come in January. So that'll be your first meeting of the new year. And obviously I will update the work programme following the meeting today to make sure we've got the agenda updated for the energy production.
Thank you. We've got now item 10, return on investment from the Horizon building. There is a exempt part to this which will be dealt with after the exclusion of the press and public. If we accidentally wander into that, Sinead will hit me quickly and ask me to tell you to be quiet. So just be careful that we stick to within that. You can ask anything you want, and that part relating to that part of the agenda. Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. So members will remember back in 2024 in September I came forward with a review of the business case and that concentrated on 3 elements, but one element around the financial business case we couldn't quite complete the figures because the return on investment is obviously driven by the anticipated sale of Thorpe Lodge, and at that point we had no offers. Members will recall that this year we have had some offers and we have agreed to progress a sale. That is ongoing and that is the bit that's exempt, and I would ask members to keep that exempt because obviously we're in a commercial contract for that. So that is in the second part of the paper around how the calculation of the return on investment has been done. But the first part that is obviously in the public arena is in terms of calculating that return on investment, we have to calculate the savings that we've made through the movement here. So I haven't recalculated the cost of the move, that was in the original paper, but what I have done is looked at in this paper the revenue savings and incomes that we've achieved to date and also projected in the future, and then the return on investment, as I say, that's in part 2. So taking you through the paper onto page 34 there, that was the table that we had in the business case in terms of savings, comparing the costs of when we were located at the 2 previous headquarters compared to being here. And as you can see there, in total we were looking at just under £680,000 saving a year, and that was split in sort of 55-45% ratio, and so Thorpe Lodge was making a saving or anticipated saving of just over £313,000 a year. So table 2 was the first year of occupation. This is a table that was in the paper in September 2024, so that's been lifted directly out of that, and you can see that in that first year of occupation we didn't quite achieve the whole £680,000 worth of saving. We actually just came in at 539, and there were 2 main reasons for that. One was around facilities team. As you know, we had 2 facilities teams, one located in each of our previous headquarters. As they came together, we thought that we would be able to reduce the amount of resource in those teams. We had some fixed term contracts to enable us to do that, but actually as we came together in that first year we actually needed more staff to help us with the move to this building, to obviously relocate a lot of the files that we had and equipment that we had in the previous 2 headquarters, and also we were still having to look after the 2 headquarters as well, and they had to obviously learn how to operate this building, so we couldn't reduce that resource significantly at the beginning of the move here. The other element was business rates. When we had the the business case, we had the estimate of what the business rates would be, but when we actually moved into the centre, there was a national revaluation exercise that was done of business rates, and actually they increased significantly from 680 to 775,000, so nearly £100,000 extra of rateable value there. We did appeal, and we did get a little bit more off. We had that reduced by a rateable value of £10,000, so in effect £5,000 a year there. And the impact of the 2023 valuation, there was no change on Thorpe Lodge there. So that was the other reason why we didn't hit the original target. Table 3 then on page 36 is the second year of occupation, so that's the cost that we incurred in June 24 to May this year, to the end of May this year, and we obviously increased our saving up to £648,000 there, and again that's mainly because we were able to start to, as I say, look at the caretaking staff there, and we could, as those fixed term contracts ended, we didn't need the additional resource anymore, so we could do that there and take advantage of that. Some slight changes because we brought in-house the cleaning staff, so there's a move there from where we did have that under cleaning and contracted out services. They are now employed staff there. And also the annex was leased from 11th of March. They did have a 6-month rent-free period, so there isn't any rental income in these figures in table 3, but there is in the projected savings going forward there. We do continue to receive income from having occupation by both the police and the Norfolk County Council, and they have 5-year agreements that conclude in 2028 there, and they have inflationary increases in there, and we do get income as well from the conference centre, and we've had a marketing campaign recently to try and raise awareness of that facility. And so therefore I've therefore looked at what we could anticipate the savings to be going forward into the rest of this year, financial year, and into next. That's based obviously, now we've got the space upstairs that we're renting out on the mezzanine, anticipating that obviously we have rented out sort of one side upstairs. Occupants, tenants took occupation in October and November, so we now have the side up here just above us occupied. We have some spare space which we are now advertising through Roche, and we are anticipating that hopefully by 1st of April next year we have tenants in there, and obviously we benefit in terms of income not only from rental income, we have a contribution to our running costs as well in the service charges, and also we will be applying to the valuation office, so those areas they occupy and including the annex that is rented out to the vets, obviously they take the responsibility for the rent for the business rates for those areas, so we should see and will see a backdated reduction in our own rates from when those businesses occupied those areas, so it saves us in business rates as well. And therefore on table on page 38, table 4, you can see that we anticipate that we should receive over £1 million a year saving, a significant saving, so over £500,000 each in terms of moving to this building, and mainly obviously a lot of that is coming from the rental of the space, the spare space that we've had. And then in the original business case we looked at capital costs and savings as well. Members will be aware that actually we did have some money set aside originally in the move here to replace our heating system, but because we took advantage of the money we got from the public sector decarbonisation scheme, we didn't need to, we haven't needed to do that. So we had a savings of £180,000 in the current financial year on that, and we used some of the other money to pay for the conversion of the space upstairs for the tenants. So table 6 there is the revised savings from the capital costs there. So that's really the first part that's into the public domain. Happy to take any questions on that element before we go into private session.
Thank you, Debbie. Very clearly explained. Thank you. Caroline.
Thank you. I'm not very good with figures, but just bear with me with this. On all of those tables, the top 9 rows have got combined costs for both offices, then Thorpe Lodge, South Norfolk, and then the move to Horizon. Further down, they're all minus figures. If you take one, which is stationery, postage and sundries, how come you've got a £35,000 minus figure on there? You must be spending money on stationery and postage, and there's no comparison with what Thorpe Lodge or South Norfolk spend on any of those tables.
That we've carried on how we displayed it originally in the original business case. We were anticipating that we would save on stationery, postage and sundries, for instance, that 35, and we have. And that's mainly been driven because we used to have more photocopiers and printers, because obviously we were in 2 buildings. We had 2 sets of contracts. We've now got fewer printers. We're using a lot less printers, and we've had a real campaign to reduce our paper usage. So that is a reduction we've made, where we're not spending as much on paper and stationery. I just haven't put what was split between the 2, because it's more difficult, because as we came together and people were working over different offices, it's more difficult to keep that. But I had the original cost that we had, and yeah, we're making 35 grand's worth of saving, mainly on the printing costs.
I'll take your word for it. It's just that we haven't got the figures there to compare it with on any of those bottom, like IT. Was it reduction in IT spent on hardware? It would be nice to have the figures to compare, so we know what savings we are making.
I can, if you want to, I can circulate what the figures would have been before and afterwards, but they are the net movements.
Personally, I'm prepared to accept your figures, Debbie. I want to make work to produce a new set of figures, but that's very positive that we're saving that amount of money. Of course, everything's getting a little bit more paperless as well. Sort of gone is the need to photocopy something, call it up 3 flights of stairs to show someone. Now you can just look at it on the screen and they know what you're talking about. So I guess that's also part of that saving. Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to ask at this point? Sorry?
Welcome the report.
Welcome the report, certainly we do. Okay, we'll welcome this part of the report and probably then move on at this point to the other part of the report. So let's get the exact wording. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006 would be disclosed to them. If everyone is happy with that.